contribution before I bring in the front benches is John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I don't want to detain the House for too long. However, I did just want to say a few words as the Member of Parliament for Maldon, which contains Bradwell on Sea. Bradwell has been the home of a nuclear power station since the early 60s. It safely generated power for nearly 40 years before it was then successfully decommissioned, and I remain a strong supporter of nuclear power. I believe, as I agree with my honourable friend, the member for the Isle of Wight, it isn't a question of a choice between renewables and nuclear. We are going to need both if we are to achieve our ambitions, particularly in terms of reducing carbon emissions. However, the fact that Bradwell has been the site of a nuclear power station for so long was probably the reason why it was chosen as one of the designated sites for new nuclear development. And there was, of course, the agreement reached between EDF and China General Nuclear, whereby Hinkley Point and Sizewell would be majority owned and financed by EDF with some Chinese contribution, but Bradwell would be the site of a Chinese-designed reactor and a majority Chinese-financed reactor. Now, I have visited China General Nuclear in Shenzhen, and when I was Secretary of State, I think the attitude of the British government was perhaps a little more friendly towards China than it is today. And at that time, the government was keen to encourage the investment to take place in Bradwell, partially because it appeared to be the only way in which we would be able to finance new nuclear, since the Chinese were the people who had the resources and were willing to do so. The honourable gentleman, my honourable friend for Isle of Wight, referred to some concerns about Chinese technology. My concern is not about the safety of Chinese technology. The Chinese reactor is now well advanced in the generic design assessment process. So far, it appears to be proceeding through that smoothly, and I suspect that it will be found to be safe. But there may be other reasons why the British government is perhaps less keen on the idea of a Chinese-owned and designed nuclear power station in this country than perhaps they were 5 years ago. And that is something which obviously I fully appreciate the reasons, and I will understand if that is the reason. But I just wanted to raise with my honourable friend the fact that Bradwell is one of the few locations that has been designated as appropriate for new nuclear, and the site there is owned by CGN. So if the government decides that it is not appropriate for a Chinese reactor to be built, I would still like to think that Bradwell would be a possible site for an alternative development of a nuclear power station. That whether or not the government reached that decision about China, I think is too early to say, and I'm sure my honourable friend won't be in a position to say definitively this afternoon. But I would like to put on record that Bradwell has hosted a nuclear power station very successfully for 40 years, Bradwell A, and that in general I saw from that the benefits that it can bring to the local community, and therefore I would be still positive about the possibility of Bradwell being the site for Bradwell B, whoever designs and owns it.